Hello, welcome. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to do Program 1 using Visual Studio. So I'm going to go to the Program 1 assignment, which is part of Module 1. And in this assignment, you're just going to write a couple of printf statements onto the screen and get used to using your compiler. So I'm going to go ahead and launch Visual Studio. I'm going to create a new project. I'm going to make sure it's an empty project and hit next. I'm going to choose the location where I want to put it. I'm going to choose to put it on my desktop. You could choose to put it wherever you want in your computer. I'm going to name this Program 1 COP 2220 Spring 2021. This name right here is the name of the directory or the folder that's going to be created by my IDE, my development environment called Visual Studio. I'm going to check this because I don't want to put a directory within a directory. I just want one level of directory. I hit create. And now if I go to my desktop, I will now have a folder on my desktop called Program 1 Spring 2021. This directory was created by my Visual Studio. Each project has one source code file, and so the way to enter add the source code file to my project, you don't launch Visual Studio with a .c file. If I launch Visual Studio with a .c file, so it will not create a valid project. So what I want to do is I want to go project, add new item, add a source file. The name of this one is going to be my last name, _, hello.c. You put the .c extension because this is a C course, not C++. We are using a C++ compiler to do C code. This tells your compiler that it is a C program and not C++. You click add, and now the source code file is part of my project. And I've gone ahead here on Canvas and given you a incomplete code to help you get started. So I'm going to download this code. I don't recommend copy and pasting it off of Canvas. I recommend downloading it. Once I download it, I open it with Notepad. What I did is I went ahead in my folders and I decided that I wanted anything with a .c extension. I wanted it like a .c file. I set the properties so that it opens with Notepad. So once you install Visual Studio, it's going to be set that all .c files open with Visual Studio. But I changed it so that all of my .c files open with Notepad. So I'm just going to open this with Notepad and copy and paste it into my project. So you don't launch Visual Studio with a .c file. You copy and paste the code into a project that you've created. Source code is just a plain text file and can be opened with Notepad. And you need to create a valid project and put the source code into your project. You don't launch Visual Studio with a .c file. It will not make a proper project. So then I paste it in here, and these two you need to add your name, date, and a brief description at the top. These two lines of code right here are called Preprocessor Directives, and they are not part of the C language. They are placed there for anyone who's using Visual Studio. So if you're using Visual Studio, I encourage you to include these two lines of code in your program. They're going to be on every sample I give you and all of the code to get started for your programs. If you're not using Visual Studio, they do not need to be here. But because I'm using Visual Studio, if you send me questions and you attach your code, there's a very good chance that this will be added to your code because I'm going to test your code with Visual Studio. This preprocessor directive must be here, #include stdio.h. This must be here in order for you to read from the keyboard or print onto the screen. For program 1, you're just going to print onto the screen. The first thing I'm going to print is hello world. That is by convention what most people do when they learn how to program. And then you're going to have to add 2 more printf statements. I believe one has your name and one has your username or something, just to practice. Build this. Make sure that it works. Start without debugging. And if you notice, it's printing hello world onto the screen. And I just want to show you a little 2 things. The first thing I want to show you is I'm going to close out of Visual Studio. And I'm going to go here into my downloads, and I'm going to launch Visual Studio with a source code file. If I double click on this and I launch Visual Studio with a .c file, it is just opening up a smart word editor. If you notice, it's not a project. This is not what the project looked like. So you can launch Visual Studio to work on your code, but you won't be able to test your code unless you make a valid project and put the code into it. Now, if I've been working on my project, so that is not even the code because I named my code with my real last name, Sorgente. So if I go here to my desktop where I put my project, and I open up the folder that I just made, inside here is my source code file. This is my source code file. I don't want to, and I need to go back and work on it because I need to add the other printf statements. So what I do launch, if I want to go back and work on it, I will launch the SLN file. The SLN file is the solution file. So Visual Studio, as long as you put code in there and you compile it and you have a valid solution, you can go back and continue to work on it by launching the SLN or solution file. So if I double click on this, it's going to launch Visual Studio. And if you notice here, it will now create my project. It brings back my project. And I'll know if I'm editing the right file because once I start working on it, a little asterisk will be here. Keep in mind that source code for your applications is just plain text. And each project should have only one source code file in this class. So you have each project. So this is program 1. I have a folder for, I'll go here to my desktop and show you again. Program 1, I have a folder for program 1, and I have a source code file for program 1. I also started working on program 2. I have program 2, and I have a source code file for program 2. So each project has its own directory, its own source code file. And just remember, if you want to go back and work on it, do not launch Visual Studio with a .c. Launch Visual Studio with a solution. And just to keep myself from doing that, I always change my .c files so that they open with Notepad. That way I know that I'm not going to accidentally launch Visual Studio and think that I have a valid project when I don't. If you have any questions, please reach out and ask the TAs or me. Be sure that you include a current version of your code when asking a question through email. And I hope you have fun working on this project.